Alright, hello once again. This is Jeff Scott of Rankin Technical College. And as part of the Rankin Technical College AWD, or Application and Website Development Program, and in particular the AWD1111 .NET Framework with Web Databases class, I've decided to go over these 50 different interview questions from an article called ASP.NET MVC Interview Questions, created from csharpcorner.com. Each of the presentations that I do will be anywhere between 10 and 20 minutes long, and will cover what I consider to be the most important, of the .50 questions that are in here. Question 21 says, explain the concept of scaffolding. Alright, scaffolding, as it says, includes pre-installed code generations for MVC and Web API projects. You add scaffolding to your project when you want to quickly add code that interacts with data models. So in other words, it can very quickly create code and do things for you. I want to show you an example of that. Actually, a couple. So let's come in here, let's start up Visual Studio, and let's start it up twice. So we're going to have two going. In fact, even though I've never done it this way, I'm going to start up three of them. All right. Now I'm going to get rid of all these projects once I get done with them, but I think hopefully you'll be able to see what I'm doing and why I'm doing it. All right? That's my hope. So let's bring the first one up here, and I'm going to start up a new project. It will be an ASP.NET application, web application, .NET framework, and we're just going to call this totally empty. Okay? And that's the problem right here that I had before. If I would have just gone through here, and hopefully at least, and had gone to my desktop, I think this would have been much cleaner, but I didn't. So, desktop, select folder. All right, so I'm going to save this totally empty project to the desktop. When I do, I want it to be empty, and I don't want it to contain anything. No web forms, no MVC, no web API, no unit tests, so I'm just going to click OK. Notice what gets built for me when I do this. I'll have to wait until it gets all done, but then I'll move this out a little wider so you can see what's going on. So it comes in here and it creates a project for me that has a web.config file. It's got a packages.config file. It's got references. All right, so I'm able to grab different things that are out there on the system. It's got some properties, but virtually it has nothing in it. All right, close that, because virtually it's an empty project. So if this was a model view controller project, I would have to start by creating a models folder, a views folder, a controllers folder, but even more importantly, I'd have to have a start folder and I'd have to do all my own routing. I'm not that good. I wouldn't probably be able to do that. So that's totally empty. Let's start another project. And we'll call it partially empty. Oops, yeah. All right. And this time, what we'll do is it will be an empty project, but we will choose down here MVC. Just that, nothing else. And click OK. And notice, if you would, because I'm going to bounce back and forth between both of these. The difference in what we have here. Now, when we did this just a second ago, see if I can bring this one up as well, but I want to, there we go. Notice what this doesn't have in it, which is virtually everything. And in here, I've got the start of a project. I've got app data to hold my databases. I do have an app start in here, which is at least got a minimal route config file. I've got a controllers folder, although it's empty, a models folder, although it's empty, and a views folder that has just a web config in it. But the point is, I've got the start of my project. All right? So, let's go back again, and this is the third one. So let's do a file, new, project, and this time, when we come through here, we'll just call it full MVC. And note the difference, because I'm going to choose MVC, which automatically chooses it here. I can change the authentication, but since I'm not going to use this project for anything, I'm just going to click OK. But note the difference in what we have between these projects. In this example, which I called full MVC or whatever it was, notice what this has in it. Not only does it have a controllers folder, but there's a home controller in it. Not only does it have a views folder, but there's a home in it with about, contact, and index, and there's a shared folder in there. All right. Now notice there's nothing in the models yet. Not saying that there is. But if I compare and contrast that one with this one, hopefully I can do what I'd like to do. And compare and contrast that one with the original totally empty that we did. By looking at all three of these, you can really see the difference between them. This is full scaffolding, partial scaffolding, no scaffolding. All right? And hopefully at least what I just said to you at least made some sense. All right? Because rather than explaining scaffolding to you, I tried to demonstrate it. All right, so that was question 21. There are scaffolding templates. There are different types of templates. Notice, create, list, delete, etc. They're discussed here on the top of this page. Create for the C part of CRUD, creating a new record, delete for the D part of CRUD, details, which is kind of, all right, details and list, which are kind of like the R read part of CRUD, and edit, which is like the update part of CRUD. All right, again, this is just meant to be, for lack of better words, the beginning. All right, I'm not going to go over what a route constraints are. What is Razor View Engine? We talked a little bit about Razor already. All right. The default engine, it says, for ASP.NET MVC we're using Razor now. And again, it's not a new programming language. It's not really a programming language itself. It uses C# syntax to allow you to embed code into HTML pages. All right. Question 24. What is output caching? Well, you should already be aware, everybody who's watching this should already be aware of what caching is. As it says, the main purpose of caching is to improve performance. I just look at caching as what it does is it allows you to use a part of memory to hold information so that you can grab it without having to go out to the internet or wherever. Question 25. What is bundling and minification? Bundling allows you to combine multiple JavaScript or multiple CSS files together so they can be downloaded as a unit. So rather than making, if you have 5 different, let's say, JavaScript files and 4 different CSS files, rather than having to make 9 individual HTTP requests, you only have to make 2, which will make your program run faster. Minification is designed to remove all unnecessary comments and white space and perform other types of compression so that the file is as small as possible so that the file loads as quickly as possible. Question 26. What's a validation summary? Well, there's an example right here. What a validation summary typically does is either at the top of your program or at the bottom. It will show you a list of error messages that you currently have related to your program. Question 27, one of the most important questions in this whole write-up. What is database first? It's an alternative to code first or model first. I'm going to try to give you this quickly. Hopefully it'll make some sense. And it's this. All right? That there's 3 different ways that you can set yourself up a project. With database first, you write the database first, and you let the model classes be developed from that database rather. With model first, you create the classes first and let the database be created from those classes. Try that again. That's code first. So let me start again from the beginning. Database first, you create the database, and then you create the classes, the model classes from that. Code first, you create the model classes first, and then you create the database off of that. Model first, you actually create first, you create an actual model, and you build the database and the code from that model. All right? This is a pretty good article. I've started to look at this. Database first approach with ASP.NET MVC step-by-step part 1. It's another one of the ones that, where is it? I have it. So that was the overview. That was creating an application. This is the database first. It's not a real long article, but it has you go and create something based off of database first. Okay? All right. Question 28. What are the folders in an ASP.NET application? Now, rather than showing you this, I'd rather show you what I mentioned to you before. Here's that full example. So what do we have here? We've got our models folder, and that'll hold the classes that are used to be our data stores. We've got a controllers folder, and that's going to be used for the classes that perform actions invoked by the user. We've got the views folder, and these are the pages that use that model data that's been given to us from the controller to populate HTML controls and then render the total HTML to the client. We've got app start, all right, and that contains the filter config and the routes config and the web app config. It's all the stuff that we need to be able to actually do routing. We've also got in here content, which is going to hold all of our CSS, both the user-defined CSS and the other defined CSS. Also, typically, if you want an images folder, you'll put it in content. App data holds the database. Fonts have got a few built-in Glyphicon fonts. Scripts have got your jQuery and your vanilla JS or JavaScript files. That's pretty much it. Question 30, I'm going to skip because that last question that's on there in this part, well, the 29 was what's the difference between MVC and web forms? Web forms are the way it used to be done. MVC is the way it's pretty much done today. Again, there's an article here if you're interested in looking at it. In question 30, what are the methods of handling an error in MVC? I'm not going to go over that. So I'll come back for the next part of this for question number 31 in just a couple moments.